How you doing? Saad, Joseph, good to see you. Just want to check the sound and everything's working okay. Sound all right? Okay. Um, Hi, Joshua. What I was thinking about today was the categories that they have for the Grand Prix. Hey, football fan. Thank you. Um, Thomas, how are you? Uh, what I what I was thinking about is that are the categories used by the GPHG by the Grand Prix are are they ones that are used, when I'm doing things with my collection? Does it help to think about those categories in terms of, gee, I'd like this or I'd like that? And for the most part, the answer is no. Um, the I know that the sort of the categorization at the GPHG has never had a final discussion. It's always been something that they're talking about, and so this is what I wanted to talk about today. What are the kinds of things that are important in collection? Now, I'm going to leave one out, and that's resale value. I know it's important to some people because they like the idea that if they buy a watch and they get tired of it, they can trade it in and get something and get most of their money back. And that I understand, but in terms of let's say horology, it's more of a it has more to do with popularity, I'll say, than horology. How you doing, Junior? So I thought, what we can do is we can take a look at the categories and say, hey, this one might be one that we find very useful, and others ones we don't. Hi, Jose. Oh, how are things in Brazil? Back when I was working, I had a number of seminars on computing with, I'm trying to think what it was, on try to remember. It was one of the last things I was working on. Had a couple seminars with Brazil, and in fact, the last book that I published was published both in Portuguese and in English. I think it was mainly for it was a computer book, so most of it was, I think, the majority of it was for Brazil. Anyway, boy, maybe we may be having thunderstorms. It's that time of day. How you doing, Brian? Okay, let's take a look at the categories that they have in the GPHG, and competing watches. All right, um, we have the following categories. Let me get them all over here out of the way. Hi, Kaz. How you doing? Joshua has a hypothesis. GPHG categories aren't entirely unhelpful, but they matter to GPHG more than anyone else. That's probably true. In fact, Joshua, I think that's a very good point. Um, a lot of it has to do with specifically with the Swiss watch industry, and so that I think is why there's some companies, for example, that have been around a long time, and there are certain watches that they have again and again are something that people have been used to or come to be used to. And so they have the iconic category for that. I don't know how much the iconic category really, is really interesting or that important to other people. But in terms of, let's say you're collecting watches, what are the kinds of things that you look for as a watch collector versus the things that they have in the GPHD? So the ladies complication, I'm going to sort of set those aside for now, and let's take a look at the sort of the other ones that they have. First of all, they have the men's. Most watches I get are, I guess, are for guys. I don't think I've ever bought one for myself. For that wasn't. So I don't know. That's sort of a catch-all category. And then they have men's complication. Now, the way they define the men's category is that they don't allow any complications in it. In other words, what they have is something like you can either have an automatic or hand wound. I think you can have the uh, hour, minute, seconds, and date. I think that's about it. But they don't have, like, for example, I don't think they allow for a second time zone or some of the other things. And if they have those, then they go into men's complication. Anyway, those two, as Joshua said, they're probably important to the Swiss watch industry. But I don't know, for collection, it's more the size that I guess most of the collection is done by guys. There's a very, very small percentage of women who are involved. This doesn't mean they're excluded. It just means that they're not interested in this in the same way that guys are. So um, the the men's in and of itself, the men's complications is simply complications. And so let me ask you that. I mean, when you're looking for a watch, are you looking for complications in general? What kind of complications? I say that because when you go on, there's tourbillon, calendar, and astronomy, mechanical exception, chronograph. All of those are complications of some sort. Power reserve, yeah. Power reserve, I guess, is okay. That's that's interesting. Yeah, that they would have the power reserve is. I guess even my resonance, which is pretty complicated, has a power reserve indicator on it. But yeah, that's probably as far as it goes. Okay, well, let me go back again. Uh, Hi, Jose. Let's see, what do you have to say? I don't care for complications except day. Okay. Tourbillon isn't complication. It's not. What is it? It's not in the well, some of them are in the complications category, Kaz. Um an escapement. Hmm. The way I look at tourbillon, it's a constant force. It's an element of constant force. And it certainly is as such. In the same, well, I guess the same way might be with the Daniels escapement. That's an interesting point, Kaz. Let me take a quick look here at men's complications. Um, yeah, in men's complications, the RDA has a tourbillon. Let's see. Some of them have a tourbillon. So does the Gucci timepiece. in why it's not in the tourbillon category, I don't know. Um, yeah, I guess that it's counted in that, but I see your point, Kaz. A complicated escapement, yeah. The Parmigiani tourbillon, just nasty, is the best possible way. How do you mean that? I like the. In fact, that's one of my favorite tourbillons is the Parmigiani. It's sort of there. Everything else is very clean, and then really the focus is on the tourbillon. Oh, incredible! I'm sorry. Okay, you're that's I I have a yes. Okay, yeah. I was wondering. Oh, what's that? All right. Okay, so what are some others? Let's take a look at some of these other ones. And well, let me. Hey, Rick on watches. How you doing, Rick? Um, the in terms of usefulness, to me, so much of what I judge a watch by is a constant force. If they have a constant force mechanism of some sort. Obviously, I'm wearing one. The resonance was set up as a constant force, actually, to keep out external resonance. Uh, Dual barrels in parallel is constant force, whereas dual barrels in series is simply a longer stretch. And so I I I consider constant force or some constant force mechanism as important. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kaz, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Tourbillon was put in for constant force, so that you would have an element that would move around that would keep things better balanced, which is a part of constant force. Hey, Mark. Hi, Nizar. How you doing? Um, so I don't know. I would put in constant force as a category, at least as a what I'll say is uh, a real world one. And tourbillon would be part of that, even though I'm not crazy about tourbillons. And from what I understand, they work better with pocket watches, but certain kinds apparently do a better job. Calendar and astronomy. Now that I don't know that one or the other sort of makes sense, but I suppose a calendar and astronomy could go together in one sense. It also seems that they don't want to have too many details. I mean, they don't want to cut it down. They like to group things. For example, sports. There's so many different kinds of sports. I was thinking, well, what about pilot watches? That's sort of a sport, but it's also, I mean, with me, it was a sport when I flew. There's my plane. But I don't know. A mechanical exception that can be a lot of different things. They used to have a category for chronometer, and to me that's constant force type of category. I wish they had it back again. Oh, good. I'm glad you made it, Nizar. Um, Sports used to have a divers. They had sort of finer categories. They used to have a travel watch, and I wish they still had that because that makes sense to me. I mean, you can have two types of travel watches, I suppose. One would be your dual or multiple time zones. The other would be a world time. Rick, from one of the reasons I'm not crazy about tourbillons, most of them don't seem to have the kind of effect that they had in pocket watches because they were kept upright. On the other hand, FB Journe has one that they said it's called, I think it's called a vertical tourbillon, and it's set differently, and apparently it helps. Okay. How you doing, Patel? Yeah, I here's one. This one I got because it's a double hairspring, and they had there's some really good articles on double hairsprings, and then I found out that they quit making them because they were so, some felt they were more difficult and more complex than a tourbillon. Um, I think a tourbillon is going to be complex no matter how you cut it. Carol, what's her face? Carol Forestier Casapi. Somebody asked her what was for her. What did she think was a more complicated uh, movement element? The chronograph, or a tourbillon, and she felt that it was the chronograph, far more complex. So I don't know. Maybe the tourbillon isn't as quite as complex, but they have a category for it. Now, I suppose there's what happened. I think in some of these categories, one of the reasons I think they have a tourbillon category is at one time one of the categories they have, and it could have been in complications. They were all tourbillons, so they said, "Well, we'll have a tourbillon category." And a tourbillon, it seems to be like a sort of a mark of horological distinction among watchmakers. I don't know. Yeah, the IMG, I agree on that 100%. Prediction: CW Belcanto will take the Petit Aiguille. Uh, Listen, some years I do really well on figuring this out. Other years I don't. So, given the popularity of the Bel Canto, I mean, on the Grand Prix picks, it certainly is that. Whether or not the people who are actually part of the Grand Prix Academy will agree is another thing. Yeah, Joshua, I tell you, I'm wrong about so many of these things. I, my predictions are done with a great deal of humility. This is why I'm sort of, you have a sports watch, then you got something in there like the $50,000 Groenfeld, which I love it, but I mean that's sort of again like you have a professional against an amateur. Um, you know, a team with Messi and Pele on it versus a little league soccer team, and this is I know that in 2017 they picked the Eberhard. Even that was like a 2,000 Swiss franc watch versus they had $180,000 Ulysse Nardin, which was really fantastic. But essentially, what they said, well, they were able to do the same thing for a lot less, including having an ETA in the Eberhard. It wasn't even an in-house movement. Yeah, Rick, I agree. Tourbillon, one reason to have a tourbillon, they're fun to look at. The Bel Canto was too MBNF for me to like, I like MBNF, so yeah, Kaz, if you're lucky, you'll get it in January. Speaking of delays, I know about delays. You can make fun of me. Who's eating? Who? Oh, no, 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 Joshua. I wasn't making fun of you. I was making fun of anybody. It's sort of like I have been wrong so many times, so I don't make fun of anybody. Don't worry about that. Um, well, Joshua, I'll have a competition with you. I bet I could outdo you a number of times I've been wrong. Oh, hey, Callus. I'm from the UK. I much prefer a watch with an uncluttered face and no complications. The movement always has to be the main feature. I agree with that. A complication, though, some complications are very complicated, but they don't seem it on the outside. One example is uh, a remontoir egalite. Those are that I would love to get my mitts on one, and but they're extremely hard to do. I was talking to Stephen Forsay, I and a couple other guys at one of the watch time shows, and I asked him. I said, he was talking about the remontoir they had in one of their watches, and I said, well, how come more people don't do it? Because it does work. It works fine. And he said, because it's really hard. The same thing happened with the double hairspring. Those blasted things were so hard to engineer and so expensive that it didn't make any sense. And so they quit doing them. Okay, Joshua. It takes hard work. Yeah. Yeah, I work hard to be wrong too. Hey, Jose, let's say coaxial as a complication. Boy, it in one hand it is, and another it isn't. It's sort of like what about Vincent Calabrese's Callisis system? Sort of using instead of having a traditional hairspring, he's got sort of like a rake between two springs, and to me, that's it's sort of his his belief is that it really helps a lot, and it may well. I don't know. The same thing is true with the coaxial escapement. You know, it's hard to say, but that's a good point. I don't know. I think it certainly cuts down on certain frictions. I know that, but whether I mean how long does something have to be a complication before it becomes sort of a standard part? It's pretty much a standard part of Omega watches now. Should be an award for dials, either difficult to produce or just extraordinarily very subjective. Well, I tell you, I think that both the jewelry and the artistic crafts pretty much handle that, don't you, MG? Because they've got some really amazing things on that. I tell you something that they did that I really like. Um, they aren't in. Well, they could be, but they're. I mean, we all consider price in buying a watch, um, and but there are limits. I mean, we have different limits before we're paying for a divorce lawyer, but there's a both the petite aiguille and the challenge categories are directed. I mean, there's simply the amount that the watch is being sold for. The only problem with both of those categories, and I don't know why, but the Grand Prix allowed quartz and electronic watches in that category. I don't know why they do that. I don't know as of yet any of them that have won that are quartz or electronic, but they allow them in. I'm not sure why. Yeah, LOL the word. Hey, Nizar, what's up? Okay. The reason I was interested in pilot watches is pilot watches as a sports watch, as a travel watch, are some other kind of, even as a tool watch. I a lot of the pilot watches are more a matter of style than what a pilot needs. Um, to me, any real modern pilot watch needs a Zulu time. They need a 24-hour time that's set to the UTC or the Greenwich Mean Time or something like that. They call it Zulu time, but that's what real pilots need. But most pilot watches, if you look at the Zenith pilot watches, I don't think they have that in their watches, even though I really like the looks of the ones that they have. The same thing with, I don't know about the Patek Philippe. They got it's a beautiful pilot watch. A Mito. Oh, Nizo, you got another Mito COSC certified at 430. Oh, 430 bucks. That's a good buy. Um, I tell you, I'm always nervous if anybody takes my advice. I was all set to top three or five, 3 or 5 pilot watches. I don't know. I don't own a pilot watch. Um, the I think after this second watch by Larique, we're going to make a pilot's watch, our Zulu Hour. And basically, what it is, we wanted to use sort of the traditional pilot style, the sort of the heritage style pilot watches with the big crowns on them, hand wound, and then have the 24-hour element in it. The Zulu time is having how to display that. I think a little sub dial with 24 hours is not what you need. I like the thing that Kadoki has in the Kadoki 3 with those triple tracks and then using a 3-armed hand. That I think would be a cool one on that. But in terms of the top 3 pilot watches, probably if you looked at airline pilots, I'll tell you, I bet the top watches would be a Rolex with a second time zone. And they set the second time zone to Zulu time, and then you just have regular ones. Those are not considered pilot watches per se, but a lot of pilots have those. I think, they probably have an electronic watch. I mean, something like an Apple Watch. They set it up, set it in their flight plan, and who's going to win the World Series. Those things have all kinds of information. But I think for a mechanical watch, the one I for some reason I really like the Patek Philippe one, even though when it first came out, the Patek Philippe loyals hated it. They didn't like it at all. But apparently, it was popular enough that they kept it on. On the other hand, the ones I like, and this was, it did have its origins in Brazil. I think it was Brazil or Argentina. Was the gondola. Hello, Mr. Gumby. How you doing there? What's up, Graham? Yeah, PDX, Rick. The reason that sounds good is that you get a good watch. That's it's one that is is good certification. Going to bed, huh? To bed on the island. How we doing on time? Whoops. Okay. Um, I got I'm on a time limit, my wife's time limit. A bit late joining tonight. I am normally out on a Saturday night. Graham, I knew you were a wild man doing crazy things on that island. Anyway, listen, guys. Okay, let me get the last one here. PDX Rick, exactly. That is not a target piece for me, but love that fellow enthusiast found the sweet spot at a good rate. Well put, Rick. I think that's true for all of us. And I love finding a good deal at a good price, more than most, probably. Anyway, guys, take care. Have a good week and see you next week.